Well, the unknowing finds me. It's not something that I can say, okay, I'm going to let go now. It's more like the ways of knowing and the things I thought I knew, they just stopped working. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know. And I think our society maybe is entering that time too, where we have these solutions that we think are going to change the situation, but they do no good. And we begin to feel helpless. We begin to feel that nothing we do is going to work. Climate change protocols, treaties, agreements, new laws, none of it works. And that's the time where people begin to give up, and space for something genuinely new emerges.
And I think that most people understand that the crisis that our society faces isn't something that we're just going to fix and continue on as normal, but it's a crisis that goes all the way to the bottom in some sense. Maybe we don't know what the bottom is, but many people have a feeling that everything is going to change. And I think that that the collaborative economy gives us maybe a hint of a different way of life, and a different experience of life, and a different experience of who we are. We have grown up in a world that we have long thought to be normal and unchangeable, and we see that world is falling apart. And we also have these glimpses of what the future could be. Most people's involvement in collaborative economy comes from some kind of experience of collaboration, or some kind of experience of connection where you think, what if the world were built on this? So we have a glimpse maybe of the destination, or at least a feeling that there is an important destination, but we don't know what it is necessarily exactly, and we certainly don't know how to get there. So we're lost in between, perhaps, exploring and experimenting and trying things and seeing how perhaps sometimes, in the end, they're just more of the same, and we feel disappointed. And certainly there are a lot of powerful critiques of the sharing economy. But that doesn't mean that destination is a false destination. So maybe I'd like to say a little bit about what that destination might be. And perhaps I'll say a word about the existing economy and the deeper stories that it comes from. Because the transition that we're going through, I believe it's a transition in our stories, in our deep narratives, you could even say in our mythology, that tells us who we are, that tells us what's normal, what's important in life, how change happens in the world, even what's real, and the role of humanity on Earth. That the change is nothing less than that.
Well, I think stories enter people's consciousness on a much deeper level than rational arguments. So stories are the most powerful form of speech. And we need to recover the technology of storytelling.
So the existing economy is part of a story of separation that says who you are is a separate self in a world of other. And there are a bunch of other separate selves out there. You're kind of this bubble of psychology encased in flesh, or a soul encased in flesh, or perhaps the expression of your nuclear DNA that seeks to maximize rational self-interest. Or in economics, the same thing. You're an economic actor seeking to maximize rational self-interest. The world outside of you is full of competitors and full of natural forces that don't care about you and that have no inherent purpose. Therefore, your well-being comes through dominating that which is outside of yourself and exploiting it for maximum advantage. And that's all built into this understanding of what a self is and how the world works. And we've built a civilization on top of that, which is no longer working because we're realizing that we're not in fact separate from each other, that even the paradise of financial independence is bereft of everything important for human happiness, intimacy, connection, community. And our separation from nature and domination of nature and conquest of these natural forces is generating ecological crisis as we learn that we're not actually separate from the rest of nature, that what we do to the ecosystem we're doing to ourselves inescapably, and that there is no technological fix to protect ourselves from the consequences of what we do. And we're learning that socially as well, that what we do to the rest of the world comes back into our own society, into our own homes even. That, to take the foreign policy example, that the violence that certain countries perpetrate on the others comes back somehow as domestic violence.
Yeah, how do you fight oppression without oppressing the oppressor? Right, that's called sub-oppression. Freire called that sub-oppression. And I think it's not even effective in the end, because the oppressor is not a bad guy, and that's why he's repressing. It's not, we think, well, if I were him, I wouldn't do that terrible thing. So really what we're saying is, I'm better than you. If we think that I wouldn't do as you do in your position, then we're saying I'm better than you. And if you're coming from a place of I'm better than you, then your opponent is going to be defensive. And he's gonna, and it's not even true. Like if the reason that people do bad things is because they're bad people, then the solution is easy. You kill all the bad people. But if that's not true, then killing the bad people won't help, because new people will come into their roles and they will do the same things that the old people did. So I think to really change the ground of oppression, we have to understand what is the story that the oppressor is living in, and what is the system that he's living in, and how can we change that? And I'm afraid that many of the tactics of conquest actually strengthen the system, because they just propagate the same mindset that is behind oppression, the mindset of separation. So, I mean, it sounds cliche, but I really think that a revolution grounded in love is the only kind of revolution that can succeed. And it's not about defeating the enemy, but it's about touching that deep divine part of ourselves that doesn't want to be an oppressor. You have to understand, the oppressors don't want to be oppressors. On the deepest level, that's not what they want either. This system works for nobody. It doesn't work for the 1%. It doesn't. Their suicide rate is just as high as everybody else's. Their depression rate, their divorce rate. It doesn't work for them either.
Because we're not actually separate selves. Who we are, and this is perhaps a new story that is evolving today, who we are interconnected, interdependent, interexistent beings. Therefore, what we do to any person, we do to ourselves. And we're also learning that the world outside of ourselves has the qualities of a self in some way, has some kind of purpose or intelligence that we desire to contribute to. Our fundamental nature then is not maximizing rational self-interest, but a very, very fundamental desire is to contribute to something greater than ourselves, to contribute to the well-being of others. And when we do that, we discover a different kind of wealth that doesn't depend on control. This understanding of wealth was common in ancient societies, which were all gift cultures. And in a gift culture, the more generous you were, the richer you were. Because if you took care of people, then they would take care of you too. If you gave generously, people would want to give generously to you, and that was your insurance policy. That was your source of wealth. You didn't need to hoard and accumulate and control. In the last several thousand years, and especially the last several hundred years, we've left gift culture behind and created a mass society that is based fundamentally on competition. We've also left behind a gift relationship to nature, where we understood that nature is not only a source of resources, but we need to give back to nature. Our relationship to nature has to be in a circle, the circle of the gift. So we've departed from that understanding both on a social and ecological level, and now we are coming back to it. Our transition back to a gift perception of the world and of each other is being born of the crisis that we face. Our old story isn't working anymore. And so we're launched into the space between stories, where all of the old certainties are falling apart. Everything that seemed unquestionable and real and permanent, even our economic and financial system, even the value of money itself, is now questionable. In 2008, it almost disintegrated. And now we have the feeling that we're living on borrowed time. So we're being pushed by these crises toward a very different world. And this is a new thing. Gift cultures were on a scale of a few hundred people in ancient villages and tribes. We've never done this on a mass scale, on the scale of millions or billions. And so what we're gathered here together to do is we're exploring how do we get from the age of separation to the age of reunion, to the understanding of interconnection, interbeing. How do we build a society on this? Part of this transition is a different experience of who we are. In the world of competition and in the money system that we're familiar with, and in that story of a self, who we are is our separate selves competing with each other. But all of us understand that we're more than that, because anybody who has achieved perfect financial independence, you might have a high salary, lots of investments, but you're not going to feel satisfied with your life unless you're contributing to something that's beautiful to you, that's meaningful to you, that engages your gifts. Even the most profit-oriented sharing economy businesses, I think deep down want to contribute to a new and ancient way of living and way of interacting in the world. Because even if we have the paradise of financial independence, we will not feel fully human if we're not contributing to something greater than ourselves. If we are not, in some sense, living in the gift. We'll feel like, I'm just living the life I'm paid to live. I'm not living my life. What about living in and contributing to something that I care about for real? I just offer you perhaps the idea of practicing the foundation of the transition to a collaborative economy, the foundation being how we see ourselves and how we see each other, and, well, how we see the world too, which is you meet somebody and you think, what gift does this person bring? And what is this beautiful thing beyond ourselves, beyond my power to create, that I can only create in collaboration? I don't know how to get there. I don't know how to do it. But I do know how to follow an impulse and be guided toward this beautiful thing that in our conversations together, perhaps we gain a little bit more clarity on. So the invitation is to really walk in the understanding that you are here to give, that you are here to collaborate, and that the place that we're going, that we're maybe a little lost in finding, but the place that we're going is a world built excuse me, a world built on that understanding. And maybe in the exercise at the beginning with the eye contact, we got a little taste of that feeling that we're not really separate.
Yeah, I don't think that anybody can offer a map of how to find ourselves when we're lost. I think that getting lost is part of finding ourselves, both as an individual and also maybe even as a society. And we're not comfortable with being lost. We're not comfortable with not knowing. But I think that not knowing, letting go of what we thought we knew, is the only way to find something beyond what we knew existed. So this process of crisis and breakdown and unknowing, it's part of a larger process, that ultimately ends in us discovering maybe a more true self or a more beautiful society.